The fog rolled in like spilled ink, dense and yellow, crawling low across the jagged rocks of Eno Station's perimeter. From the window of the research outpost, Franklin Voss watched it silently, arms crossed, a wrench hanging loosely from his hand. The air filtration alert had been blinking red for the past 2 hours, and the fog wasn't showing signs of letting up. None of the drones sent into it had returned in one piece. One had melted its outer casing within minutes. Another lost signal and was found an hour later, its circuitry fused into a glossy black lump. "Your atmosphere is reckless," the voice behind him hissed with a calm disdain. Reckless and biologically irresponsible, Franklin didn't turn around. He recognized the voice Professor Ilyax from the Dalvuan Concord, a highly regarded xenoecologist with 3 PhD tickets in comparative planetary biospheres, and an ego the size of Europa. "I didn't design the planet," Franklin said. "I just fix things when they break." Ilyax moved closer, his long limbs swaying with a deliberate grace. His skin shimmered faintly in the room's lighting, shifting between dull blue and smoky gray. His large black eyes blinked once slowly. "My team needs to collect gas samples from the heart of that fog. The window of optimal density occurs only once every Enovian cycle. That is to say, once a year," Franklin cut in. "Yeah, I read the briefings. Then you understand the urgency." "I understand you'll die in under 3 minutes if you step into it." Ilyax's eyes narrowed. "I am aware. Which is why I am giving you 36 hours to construct an appropriate filtration system capable of allowing me safe passage. It must hold for at least 40 minutes under direct exposure. I will not settle for less." Franklin finally turned. "And if it can't be done, then I will report a failure of cooperation to the United Galactic Research Council." Ilyax paused, letting the weight of the words linger. "You will be replaced." Franklin stared at him for a long moment, then looked back at the fog. It wasn't just toxic, it was corrosive, acidic, and laced with micro-spores that bored into organic tissue. Breathing it in would be like inhaling bleach and sandpaper wrapped in fire. 36 hours, Franklin muttered. "Fine, I'll get started." He didn't wait for a response. He left the observation deck, boots thudding down the graded stairs of the outpost's interior. The lab was cluttered as usual. Tools, metal scraps, and empty coffee mugs covered nearly every surface. He cleared a space with one arm and pulled out a sketch pad. He wasn't going to rely on digital design programs, he needed tactile thinking. Something real. By the time the first hour passed, he had a rough concept. A layered filtration mask with interchangeable cartridges, a triple-sealed faceplate, and a rebreather unit with internal cooling to prevent fog-induced overheating. 5 hours in, he'd scavenged parts from 2 decommissioned rover air systems and 3 broken oxygen tanks. By hour 10, he had the shell of the mask built, though it was heavy and unwieldy. Around midnight, Franklin's assistant technician, Tessa Paulrich, wandered in, rubbing her eyes. "You're still up." "Got a deadline," Franklin said without looking up. "Toxic fog, alien professor, threats of professional ruin." Tessa blinked. "Oh, that kind of deadline." She moved to the workbench and picked up a small filter disc. "These won't last 40 minutes in that stuff. You'll need something denser." "I know. I'm working on a multi-stage scrubbing system. Activated carbon, silver mesh, and a chemical neutralizer, but I'm running low on silver weave." Tessa opened a drawer and tossed him a small bag. "I raided the medical bay, don't tell doctor." "Kelwin," Franklin grinned weakly. "You're the best, don't I know it?" The next 15 hours were a blur of torch sparks, chemical tests, and failed prototypes. One mask crumpled under pressure. Another leaked. A third caught fire. Franklin's hands were covered in small burns and cuts, and his shoulders ached from the weight of the prototype tanks. At hour 29, he collapsed into a chair, breathing hard. The latest model, sleek, reinforced, and ugly as sin, sat on the table in front of him. "Test it," he said hoarsely. Tessa wheeled over a small vacuum chamber designed to simulate the fog's chemical environment. Franklin fitted the mask over a synthetic head model, sealed it, and activated the chamber. The internal sensors lit up. The machine hissed. The fog compound was replicated and pumped into the chamber. They waited. After 10 minutes, the oxygen readout remained stable. At 20, no corrosion. At 35, the internal pressure dipped slightly but held. At 41 minutes, Franklin shut the chamber down. He exhaled slowly. It held. Tessa leaned forward, wiping fog condensation from the chamber window. It's ugly. It's alive. They presented the mask to Ilyax in the observation room. The alien inspected it with long, spindly fingers, turning it over. It is inelegant, he said. Franklin rubbed his temples. But it works. I will test it myself. Franklin blinked. You what? I will enter the fog personally. I trust no one else to maintain the precision of my measurements. You trust me to build a mask that keeps you alive, but don't trust anyone else to carry a gas sampler? Correct, Franklin sighed. Suit yourself. But we're doing this by the book. You'll wear a monitor. Tessa will track your vitals. I'll be outside, ready to drag you back if things go south. And if the mask fails, then you die and I lose my job, so let's hope it doesn't. The next morning, the fog was thicker than ever. Franklin stood at the edge of the airlock, watching Ilyax strap on the mask. The suit was sealed, the oxygen tanks full. The mask clicked into place with a low, pressurized hiss. You'll have 40 minutes, Franklin said. Tessa's watching your vitals, don't push it. Ilyax didn't respond. He stepped into the lock, waited for the chamber to equalize, then vanished into the yellow mist. Franklin didn't sit. He paced, eyes flicking between the monitor and the timer. 5 minutes in, oxygen stable. 10 minutes, still steady. At 15, Ilyax's temperature rose slightly but corrected. At 25, he paused. Readings showed elevated heart rate. He's nervous, Tessa said. Or the mask's leaking, Franklin muttered. 32 minutes in, the vitals spiked. Ilyax's breathing shot up. Franklin cursed and reached for the calm. Professor, report. Ilyax's voice came through, muffled but clear. I encountered a denser pocket, adjusting flow rate. The mask is holding. I will complete the cycle. Franklin bit his lip. You have 5 minutes left, don't push it. At 39 minutes, Ilyax turned back. The vitals steadied. The external sensors showed minor corrosion on the outer mask housing, but nothing critical. The airlock hissed open at 43 minutes. Ilyax stepped back inside, the mask pitted but intact. Franklin helped him out of the suit, hands shaking slightly. Well, he asked. Ilyax held up a small, sealed container filled with swirling yellow fog. It worked, he said. Adequately. Franklin let out a breath and leaned against the wall. Ilyax looked at him for a long moment. You are an unusually competent engineer, Mr. Voss. I try. I will note this in my report. Good, Franklin said. Now I'm going to sleep for a week. He didn't get a week. The next day the fog mutated, but that was a problem for another mask. The fog hadn't receded. It clung to the terrain like it had a purpose, a sentient stubbornness that defied the outpost's aged weather instruments. By day, it glowed faintly amber. By night, it turned a dirty green, laced with flickering motes that didn't show up on scans. No one knew whether it was alive, reacting to motion, or simply a chemical soup with a twisted sense of aesthetics. Franklin stood at the infirmary entrance, arms crossed, watching Ilyax let the medbot scan his shoulders. The alien's skin had developed a chalky film along the ridges of his upper thorax, possibly a reaction to the fog exposure, though his vitals remained stable. You've got crystallization starting along the dermal folds, said Dr. Kelwin, adjusting her faceplate. It's not dangerous yet, but if you get another dose of that stuff too soon, your outer layer might start flaking like old paint. Ilyax barely blinked. I was not harmed. You also weren't preserved, Kelwin replied. I don't want to be scraping pieces of you off the lab floor next time. Franklin glanced at a nearby tray of medical tools. I can reinforce the interior plating on the next mask. Add a thermal buffer. That won't address dermal exposure, Kelvin said. He needs an exo-skin coating. Something bio-neutral. I will not wear a human-manufactured gel, Ilyax said flatly. Your polymers are unstable. Your compounds decay under radiation exposure. Kelvin looked at Franklin. He's going to be delightful when his face peels off. Franklin leaned against the wall. We've got some of the old nanofiber wetsuits in storage, the ones we used back when the sulfur pits were still active. I can rework one to fit his frame. Coat it in the insulating compound we use on cryo valves. Kelvin tilted her head. That might actually work. If it doesn't, you get to explain to the Concorde why their ecologist looks like a cracked ceramic tile. I will accept the suit, Ilyax said, but I will supervise its modification. Of course you will, Franklin muttered. Later that cycle, Franklin found himself in the outpost's lower storage bay, waist-deep in a pile of outdated gear. The wetsuits were stored in vacuum-sealed bins, stacked behind crates labeled obsolete do not issue. He hauled one out, dusted off the top layer of plastic, and sliced it open with a utility blade. The suit was stiff, coated in a thin film of thermal dust that smelled faintly of burnt rubber and salt. He laid it out on the workbench and began measuring, muttering to himself as he adjusted the limb lengths. Ilyax stood nearby, watching with the unblinking intensity of someone convinced incompetence was imminent. Your species has peculiar proportions, Franklin said, holding up one of the sleeves. Too many joints, too few bones where bones should be. Ilyax didn't move. Our physiology is optimized for vertical mobility and environmental adaptation. Yours appears to be optimized for sitting. Thanks. He applied the first layer of insulating gel with a spatula, smoothing it into the fabric. It hardened quickly, forming a semi-flexible shell. The second layer was more delicate, a silvered composite mesh that responded to electromagnetic shifts. He embedded it between sheets of the suit lining, then sealed the seams with a thermal gun. You'll need 15 minutes to suit up, Franklin said. I'd recommend doing it seated. Once it's on, you're not bending much. I do not require comfort. Good, because this thing's about as cozy as wearing a frozen mattress. The next morning, the outpost received an unexpected visit. A transport shuttle from the Concorde descended through the haze, its undercarriage lights stabbing through the fog like search beams. It landed with a hiss and a burst of pressurized steam. Franklin met the delegation at the main hatch. 3 Dalvuan aides stepped out, followed by a fourth figure shorter, broader, wearing a cloak that shimmered like wet stone. The figure removed the hood, revealing a face segmented into overlapping plates. Engineer Voss, it said, in a voice like dry leaves scraping on metal. I am Archivist Nerx. I have come to evaluate your environmental countermeasures. Franklin blinked. You're not with the science division. I oversee Concorde documentation. Any technology used in high-risk zones must be cataloged and verified before further deployment. Ilyax approached, suit slung over one arm. Nerx, this is a waste of time. The system functions. That is not in question, Nerx said. The methods and materials are, Franklin gestured toward the workshop. You want a demonstration or a full teardown? Both. They spent the next 6 hours in the lab. Nerx examined the mask's internal systems, tested the filtration cycles, and cross-checked the material composition against an interstellar database Franklin had no access to. The archivist's hands moved with mechanical precision, fingers adjusting dials with a surgeon's confidence. At one point, Nerx paused. This adhesive, where did you source it? Franklin didn't look up from the calibration panel. Kitchen drawer. It's a protein binder we use for food storage units. Holds up under heat, resists chemical breakdown, and it's edible in emergencies. Nerx's head tilted. You used culinary bonding agents? Worked better than the sealant from the rover kits. The archivist turned to Ilyax. Are you comfortable relying on this? Culinary engineering, I am alive. That is sufficient. By evening, Nerx concluded the inspection. Your solutions are unconventional. Means they work, Franklin said. They will require classification under Adaptive Fieldwork Protocol Class 5, Subsection 3. I don't know what that means. It means you are now a certified improvisational systems specialist. Provisional, Franklin raised an eyebrow. Is that a compliment? Statistically neutral. Ilyax looked mildly irritated. We've lost a day. The fog's density will decline in 24 hours. If we miss the next window, we wait another cycle. Franklin rubbed his temples. Then we suit you up tomorrow, early. No delays. That night, Franklin didn't sleep. He ran diagnostics on the mask 3 times, recalibrated the oxygen regulator, and reinforced the suit's knee joints with a spare brace from the rover suspension. He wasn't taking chances. Not with this much pressure. When dawn broke not that it was visible through the haze, Ilyax entered the prep chamber and stepped into the modified suit. The gel lining hissed faintly as it adjusted to his body temperature. Franklin sealed the backplate, then attached the mask. The suit looked like a cross between a medieval diving outfit and a silvery insect. Your limbs will lose some mobility, Franklin said. Keep your movements deliberate. The suit's balance compensators will adapt. I understand. I mean it. Don't do anything fast. This thing's not built for sprinting. I do not sprint. Well, good. They entered the lock. Tessa was on comms again, monitoring biosigns. This time, 2 other Dalvuan researchers stood by with scanning instruments, their hoods drawn tight against the filtered air. The lock cycled. The fog swallowed them. Franklin stayed at the external console, watching the readouts. Ilyax's vitals were steady. The suit held. The external sensors showed minor interference from the fog motes, but nothing alarming. At minute 17, Tessa frowned. His heart rate just dropped by 10 beats. He's adjusting to the exo-skin. Keep watching. At minute 25, Ilyax's comm crackled. Sampling complete, proceeding to secondary site. Franklin leaned closer. You've got 15 minutes left, don't wander. I am not wandering. I am observing. At minute 38, Nerx appeared beside the console. You used a food-grade polymer for the internal sealant. I did. Interesting. At minute 42, Ilyax returned. The lock hissed open. The suit was intact, though the outer shell bore streaks of fine etching as though something had tried to write on it with acid. Franklin helped remove the helmet. Ilyax's face was flushed, but uninjured. I encountered a deeper fog pocket. The density was nearly double previous readings. But the suit held. It did. Franklin nodded. Then we're done here. Nerx stepped forward. No, you're just beginning. The Concorde will request additional suits. We will need schematics, fabrication protocols, and a full breakdown of your culinary adhesive. Franklin stared at him. You want to mass-produce this thing? It is the only model that functions. I built it from kitchen supplies and spare parts. Then you will teach others to do the same, Franklin sighed. This is going to be a very strange job, isn't it? Ilyax adjusted his outer cloak. You adapt. That is your species' only redeeming quality. Franklin grinned tiredly. We do what we can with what we've got. Nerx tapped a data slate. The council will expect your first workshop within 14 days. Bring food. Franklin blinked. Why? They want to taste the adhesive. The first thing Franklin noticed about the Concorde transport bay wasn't the size, it was the silence. Despite housing over 40 occupants, the chamber was hushed, the kind of quiet that belonged in libraries or mausoleums, not central logistics hubs. He stood awkwardly between 2 towering crates marked with symbols he couldn't read, waiting for the final inspection. Remain still, said the archivist technician across from him, a lean being with translucent skin and a single vertical pupil that adjusted like a camera lens. I've been standing still for 15 minutes, Franklin said. If I stand any more still, I'll be part of the architecture. The technician didn't respond. It moved a scanning wand around Franklin's upper torso, paused near his ribs, and made a low chirping noise. Residual compound detected, it said, probably from the adhesive. I got some on my shirt. It's non-toxic unless you're allergic to tapioca starch. The technician stepped back. Documented. Continue. He was ushered down a narrow corridor lined with hexagonal lights that dimmed as he passed. Eventually, he arrived at a room where Ilyax stood facing a curved display screen. A set of translucent diagrams floated in the air detailing fog composition changes over the last 12 cycles. "So," Franklin said, not bothering with a greeting, "your people still want more suits. And they still think it's a good idea to do it here, where the air tries to chew through metal." "Your sarcasm is noted," Ilyax said. "The Council has approved the use of your design. You will instruct fabrication teams on site. They have no experience with improvisational engineering." "You mean they've never had to fix a water filter with chewing gum and a wrench?" "They have never had to fix a water filter at all." Franklin crossed to the screen, eyeing the data. "You've got an uptick in fog acidity. That's a problem. It is why we are accelerating the schedule. The next sampling must occur before the compound becomes unprocessable." "How many suits are we building?" Six, Franklin frowned. "I barely had materials for one. You're asking for 6. You will instruct. Others will build. I haven't seen a single one of your people hold a torque driver the right way up. Then teach them." Franklin sighed, rubbed his eyes, and turned toward the corridor. "I need coffee before I teach anyone anything." Later that cycle, he found himself in Bay 12, where 6 Dalvuan technicians stood around a table like they were trying to decipher a sacred relic. Laid out before them was a half-disassembled helmet, the inner filtration membranes visible like the guts of a dissected animal. Franklin dropped a toolbox on the table. The clang echoed sharply. "All right," he said. "Let's start with the basics. This," he pointed to a section near the rebreather inlet, "is where the air comes in. If this seals improperly, you're not filtering anything. You're just inhaling death with a cherry on top." One of the technicians, a 3-armed creature with a cluster of small eyes along its jawline, raised a hand. "Why use layered mesh instead of a single filtration compound?" "Because your fog isn't a single threat. It's chemical, microbial, corrosive, and thermal. You throw one net at it, it slips through. You throw 5, you catch more." Another technician leaned in. "What is this material here?" "It resembles containment foam." "That's because it is. Industrial grade. We use it to patch hull leaks. Here it's compressed and embedded with silver nanothreads. Stops microbial intrusion and stabilizes airflow. Don't melt it during bonding. It loses cohesion above 70 degrees Celsius." They worked for hours. Franklin moved from station to station, correcting grip angles, adjusting torch temperatures, and stopping one technician from trying to use a bonding agent that would have reacted violently with the suit lining. At one point, a sharp hiss rang out. One of the suits had ruptured along the side seam, spewing adhesive across several tools and one unfortunate technician's limbs. "Don't move," Franklin said, stepping forward. "That stuff sets fast on skin. If it hardens, we'll have to soak you in solvent for a day and a half." The technician froze. Franklin grabbed a spray bottle from the emergency kit and doused the affected areas. The adhesive foamed, hissed, and peeled away like a second skin. "Keep the bonding chamber under 45 degrees. You're cooking the sealant. We calibrated for your range," the technician said, voice tight. "Yeah, but my range doesn't include you forgetting to vent the chamber." By the end of the cycle, they had 2 functioning prototypes and one that looked like it had been assembled by someone blindfolded underwater. Franklin sat on a crate, sipping lukewarm tea from a thermopack. Ilyax entered, scanning the suits with a distant expression. "You are behind schedule. You're welcome to try it yourself," Franklin said. "I would damage the equipment. You'd also understand how hard it is to make this work without half the tools I asked for. You were supplied with Concord standard fabrication equipment, which is great if I wanted to build a flute or a diplomatic medallion. I asked for polymer extruders and a soldering rig. You gave me ornamental etching tools and a ceramic press. Ilyax studied him for several seconds. Your frustration is predictable. Franklin stood up. So is your attitude. They stared at each other. Eventually, Ilyax turned toward the suits. 2 are serviceable, 1 is unacceptable, Franklin nodded. The others will be ready by the end of next cycle if your people stop trying to shortcut the process. They are not used to failure. Well, they're about to learn. By the following dusk, the final suits were assembled. Each one passed vacuum chamber tests, chemical resistance trials, and a brief live trial in the auxiliary fog chamber. The technicians, while visibly exhausted, had stopped questioning Franklin's instructions. The Concorde held a final review in the transport bay. Archivist Nerx returned, this time accompanied by a pair of security officials. Their presence was ceremonial. They carried no weapons, only thickly bound data tablets. The designs have been replicated, Nerx said. Deployment will proceed. Franklin crossed his arms. You're going to send them in tomorrow. There is no reason to delay. Ilyax stepped forward. Sampling will begin at sunrise. I will lead. Franklin raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? You've been in once. That fog's changed since then. I am aware. But my familiarity with the terrain and compound behavior makes me the most qualified. You're going to monitor vitals again? Franklin asked, turning to Tessa, who stood nearby adjusting her headset. Yes, and we've added redundancy channels this time. If anything spikes, we pull them out immediately. The next morning arrived with a dull, ochre haze that pressed against the outpost windows. The 6 Dalvuan researchers lined up outside the airlock, suits sealed, masks gleaming faintly in the wan light. Ilyax stood at the front, his posture rigid, his face unreadable. Franklin checked each seal personally. No gaps, no wear, no signs of adhesive degradation. You've got 40 minutes, Max, he said, voice low. If something feels wrong, come back, no heroism. Ilyax nodded once. The airlock cycled. They vanished into the fog. Franklin stood by the console, eyes locked on the vitals feed. Tessa worked beside him, fingers flying over the control board. 5 minutes. All green. 15. Still stable. At 27, one suit registered a temperature spike. Franklin leaned in. Suit 3's heat regulators overcompensating. I see it, Tessa said. Adjusting flow rate should stabilize in 30 seconds. 31 minutes, stable again. At 39, the team began returning. The airlock opened. One by one, they stepped through. No damage. No injuries. No signs of exposure. Ilyax entered last, carrying 3 sealed containers and a small data node. Franklin exhaled. You're all still breathing. That's a good sign. Ilyax removed his mask. Your design functions under elevated toxicity. Franklin tossed him a towel. You're welcome. Nerx appeared behind them. Documentation is complete. The Council has approved the design for wider use. Franklin blinked. You're going to manufacture these off-world. They will be used on any planet with similar atmospheric threats. Your contributions will be logged. Logged. Under emergency adaptive methodologies, Tier 3, Franklin grinned. I'll frame it. Ilyax turned to him. Despite your methods, the result is effective. That is what matters. Yeah, Franklin said. Sometimes ugly works. Behind them, one of the Dalvuan technicians said something in their native tongue. Another responded with a chittering laugh. Franklin didn't ask for a translation. He just picked up his toolkit, patted the side of the nearest suit, and headed for the mess hall. For once, no one needed saving, and the fog, for now, stayed outside.